Lady of the Dunes, and he's already published other books. I don't have his biography in front of me because that's something that Elix would have. But I know Christopher is an amazing guy, and when I was filming the documentary, I got to meet him, and he's become a really good friend. And Elix and I cannot wait to get an update on what's going on with the book. Of course, if anyone's wondering or have never heard of this, actually, when I was at the dentist yesterday, I said to the dentist, he said, so what's been going on, Stephen? And I told him about Lady of the Dunes, and him and the hygienist looked at me, and they're both here on the Cape, with cross eyes, like, what's Lady of the Dunes? So it's kind of interesting, but Lady of the Dunes, was the oldest unsolved murder in Massachusetts from July 26, 1974. This woman's body was found in the dunes at Race Point Beach in Provincetown, and Frank Durant, the producer and director of this documentary, decided to do a documentary. So last April 2021, I was part of the filming, which was, I think, up to now, one of the most exciting things I've ever done, to be part of this documentary. And I was, as Stephen the Medium, in using my mediumship gifts, if you will. But it was terrific. It was great. And as I mentioned, that's how I met Elix, and I got to meet Christopher. And at that point, it had been almost 50 years that this woman, which we all referenced her as Lady of the Dunes, had no identity. And the killer was also unknown. So we did the documentary. It premiered April 2022 in Dennis first, which is on the Cape, and then in P-Town, which was amazing because it was the same place that Lady of the Dunes was found. And October 31st of this year, I was on my computer. I think I didn't have court. I'm an attorney, so I didn't have court, but I was home, and all of a sudden I got this notification that they're going to make an announcement about a P-Town murder. And I'm telling you, I grabbed the phone to call Frank to see if he knew about it, and I was so excited. It took me like a minute to get his number because I was so excited. I wanted to talk to him, and of course I got his voicemail, but he called me right back and said, "What are you talking about?" He had no idea. So the FBI did this press announcement in Boston, and again, it was October 31st, that they used DNA and found out after almost 50 years who this woman was, which is pretty incredible. And Frank, I don't want to speak on behalf of Frank, but I've spoken to Frank so many times that was certainly a goal of his, was to shine the light or maybe put some pressure on the authorities or whoever was controlling the investigation to get to this place of using DNA or genealogy and figuring out who this woman, and it happened. It's remarkable. It's amazing. April, the documentary premieres, and in October, after almost 50 years, they figure out who this woman is. So I know they're still doing the investigation, and I know Christopher has way more information than I do, because I think Frank just gave Christopher all the information and all the footage. And with a book, I know Christopher's using his magic to put this book, which I know is going to be a top seller, no question, together in this book, which is pretty amazing too. But I think it's incredible. And I told Frank, and I'm sure Christopher will agree, that, and Christopher is just as part of this documentary as I am, or any of the players are, because he's writing the book. Probably even more so, because Christopher, as I mentioned a second ago, he knows a lot. And what I love, and Elix love about Christopher, is that he just gets so into it, and you can almost feel, and we're going to talk to him, feel his passion of what he does. And he has this, I think he has this great life and this great story. So, but he is so intense in such a great way. And I think, you only see that intensity. God only knows I do readings pretty much every day, and I talk to dead people every day. And I know that when you are in the flow of where you're supposed to be, when you find your passion and you figure out why you've been placed here on Earth is when that intensity comes. And Christopher, there is no doubt if you ever met him, that passion and that intensity is absolutely there. So, and I feel so privileged too that I get to do this, get to be part of this. And again, I would not have met Frank. I would not have met Christopher or all these amazing guys, Steve and Brandon, who own a hotel and a restaurant in P-Town, who have become such great friends, and they're the most incredible guys. All these people have sort of been handed to me on a silver platter because of the documentary, which is pretty amazing too. And by the way, the DVD comes out December 31st. You can get that via oldies.com. And again, I know Christopher will speak about it. And I'm also going to let Christopher talk about the note that I did and what he asked me about the note. And I can talk about that a little bit with Christopher. So, but everything, everything is with the Lady of the Dunes is so far more than than I expected. And you can imagine, as a medium who I didn't even know I was a medium until 2010, and didn't do my first actual formal reading was like the end of 2014. How exciting it was to be asked or be interviewed, because I think Frank interviewed 30 mediums across the country, and asked would I want to be part of this documentary. And I live on the Cape, so this documentary that centers around Provincetown, P-Town, and all 30 said yes and thumbs up that they wanted to do this. Of course they did. And there were four of us, four mediums that were selected, and I was one of the four out of that many mediums. So you can imagine the excitement, and just could not wait to be part of the filming and be part of the documentary. And even with that said, it just exceeded my expectations, which is pretty amazing. And we actually moved. We lived in Norton, another town, probably about 40 minutes from here, 2 years ago. It just hit 2 years last month. So there's no way that this was not the universe, and how our lives are these opportunities, and our universes just guide us to where we're going to go. And I teach class, and I always tell students that if you don't know what your passion is, and clearly that's not Christopher's take on this, but if you don't know, you just have to keep looking. It's sort of like stars in the sky at nighttime, that you may not know exactly which one is yours, but if you keep looking and having faith and trusting and be curious, you're ultimately going to find out why you're here, which is pretty amazing. And some people figure that out very quickly, and some people take a little bit longer, and some people don't figure it out at all, and then they're back in spirit. And maybe that's why they come back in different aspects, or different roles. And so it is this is kind of great, because I stopped doing my show. I don't know, it was a couple of months ago that I did through the Static for just over 4 years, and I haven't done this. I haven't led, even though I'm Elix's co-host, I haven't led a show, and it's like riding a bicycle. I just got right back on. It's been so great, and I actually love it. I love that when we have listeners, because and Elix and I have the best listeners. There's no question about that. But I just love getting to talk and giving. I think what I'm gonna do is have Elix probably switch, and I will try to get on his computer, because he's got everything prepared and set for Christopher, but I've got to be part of this because I'm so excited about Chris and being here, and this is really, really exciting. So you know what? It's just about break time, so let's take a break. I'm going to scoot down really fast to check on Elix, and one or two of us will be back, but one of us will be back. So hold on for an amazing show, and we will be right back.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. And this is your host, Coach Helix, and we've been having some technical difficulties. And thank God that Stephen was able to get in and be with you for the first segment of our show. But I think what we're going to do is Stephen is going to call so that we can have him on the line with our guest, Chris
I think
Setterlin.
I'm here.
You are? Are you here?
I am here.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So there we have it. So Stephen, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sorry that you had to do the first segment on your own, and I have no idea what is happening on my end.
It was
But
like
nevertheless,
you had to twist my arm to do that.
I know, especially talking about Lady of the Dunes. But anyways, we have an amazing guest today, and last week we had the privilege to talk to Frank Duran, who's the executive producer and director of the Lady of the Dunes documentary. And today we have Chris Setterlin, who is a 12th generation Cape Codder. He's a former film director and an author who writes across all genres, intending to reach as many people as possible by being diverse. Chris is known for writing about the famous Lady of the Dunes. One thing about Chris is when you get to know Chris, he is super passionate about what he does, and I am so excited. I know Chris to be a storyteller, and he told me that at an early age he could write tales of adventures about himself and his friends. And despite going to college with the intention of turning to film, he found fulfillment in creating stories and bringing his own world and characters to life. And listen, we're very lucky that he's doing that because I know he's writing and he wrote an amazing book about Lady of the Dunes. Welcome back, Chris.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Helix and Steven. It's so great to hear you guys.
It's really great to have you, Chris, and it's always fun. It's always amazing to chat with you because every time I have a conversation with you, I feel that you put me at the edge of the seat because your passion and your love for what you do is so palpable. It really does come across in the work that you do. Now, Chris, you noticed your interest and love for storytelling at a very young age. When did you realize that you wanted to tell stories, and how old were you?
So the first story I ever wrote was in second grade, and this was just a little adventure of a few friends of mine and I just doing something. But I enjoyed the idea of creating worlds with words and the ability, especially in fiction, to take anything that was in my head and kind of get it out on the page and getting some positive reinforcement from people reading it. That helped keep me going.
And of course, you got to write about the Lady of the Dunes, and now we have a whole lot of new developments in that case, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what inspired you, Chris, to write about this specific story?
Oh, the Lady of the Dunes book. Well, so the way this all started was, and you guys both know Frank. He is 100% himself from the moment you meet him, and he reached out to me through social media, and he asked me if I'd like to talk about the Lady of the Dunes because he had Googled me and Googled Cape Cod author and found me, which that was kind of flattering in itself. But I said to him, I might not be the foremost authority on the Lady of the Dunes. You might want to look at other people. And he, within half an hour of speaking with him, he had his passion rubbed off on me. And I said, oh, I'm in. He had me convinced pretty quick.
Now, Stephen, you got to meet Chris because, of course, you were part of this amazing documentary. What was it like for you when you make this connection with Chris in what he's doing with the book?
Well, it was interesting because I didn't know what to expect being in this documentary. I really didn't, and I was a little bit guarded, because Frank and I had already talked about the possibility of people pushing back with him, and it was more him, not me. But filming, I didn't know who I was going to be exposed to. But I got to tell you, the first moment I met Chris, I could tell right away. I'm like, oh, this is definitely my kind of guy. His energy, I could tell he was connected to spirit. His auras were like just the most healthy colors and the passion. And as I said in the introduction, Elix, I know you probably didn't hear this, but I said, Chris's intensity for what he does just is really reflective of that. He's in his passion. He's doing what he's supposed to do and why he was set here to come on Earth. So it was amazing.
Yeah, no question about it. I just, I said that, Chris's passion comes across in such a palpable way when you meet him that he just really, when you talk, Chris, he puts the audience at the edge of the seat because we want to keep hearing more. Now, of course, there is always a close relationship between a book and a movie, in this case, a documentary of the same story. What do you feel, Chris, is the relationship between your book and Frank's documentary?
So I feel the book is a deeper look into Frank's work. So he ended up with more than 50 hours of footage that obviously he couldn't put into a 90-minute documentary. And when I came aboard, he said, look, you've got access to everything I've done. And that was great because the book follows Frank's work, Frank's perseverance to give the Lady of the Dunes her name back. And it's so fitting that it actually has happened because that was his intention from the beginning. He was very upfront. He said, I don't care about making money from this. I don't care as much about who killed her and why. I look more at the person, and every human deserves a name. Her family deserved to know what happened to her. And that was my same idea growing up with this case. The fact that I could even be associated on the periphery with something that helped to push the identification through. It's overwhelming and humbling. And I believe that the book it's got so much more than what's in the documentary because things kept happening after the documentary was out. And I told Frank repeatedly up until a few weeks ago when he and I went out into the dunes, I said, it's like I live in a movie every time I'm around you, which is a good thing.
Chris, you make a point it's so valid because, many people who are working the case, have done something with the case, they are connected with the case in a very different way that you are. You are a 12th generation Cape Codder. So you grew up with this story in the background. And that's a whole different level than somebody who just was curious about the story, wanted to do something about the story. What was that like for you?
So the Lady of the Dunes story, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I had one view of what had happened, where it was a lovers quarrel. They were out in the dunes doing whatever, and something happened, and she ended up dead. And after working with Frank and writing the book, and it changes my opinion of Cape Cod and where I grew up, but not necessarily a bad way. It actually makes Cape Cod, it fleshes out the story more, where it's not just a vacation destination. It's got so many layers, like an onion. And that goes back to, that's something that Steven said, I think, within the first 5 minutes that I met him about the layers and the onion. And it's funny how that keeps coming up.
Absolutely. Stephen, anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I remember, I remember having that conversation about the onion and the layers. But I'll tell you, Chris, did you ever expect that you were going to have this experience, walk this path now that Frank, this director that you didn't even know, just find you based on Cape Cod authors and be part of this to write this book into the development of, as what Elix will get into, about her identity being found? Is this like wild for you?
It still is unbelievable because I've been writing books for years. I did ebooks. I've got 7 traditionally published books, and it seems like each one I was looking for what was next. Like, what is this going to lead to? It's like another step on the ladder. And when Frank reached out to me, and once I realized this was real, I said, it's unbelievable, because I never expected to be considered any sort of Cape Cod historian. And for Frank to reach out and basically say, you were someone that came up that I think could do justice to the book for my documentary. It's humbling and overwhelming, but it's also, there's a little bit of pressure because I know the quality of work that Frank put in. So it really made me step my game up to make sure that my book and on my end is worthy of the documentary and worthy of the Lady of the Dunes case itself.
Yeah. Listen, and deserving. By the way, we do need to take a break, Chris, but you have to hang in there because, of course, the biggest news is that the mystery of the Lady of the Dunes has been solved. We now know who she is, and I want to talk much more with you about that. So, Chris, hang in there. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. I'm your host, Coach Helix. With me, my wonderful co-host,
Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium, attorney, medium. He's in the house, and he's actually connected via phone today because we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and he was, my hero because without him, I would not have been able to do the first segment of the show. So he is a lifesaver. So, and also, of course, today we're talking about the Lady of the Dunes, and we are so excited because we had such a privilege to have today. We have the writer of the Lady of the Dunes book, Chris Sutherland. Chris, welcome back.
Oh, thank you guys so much for sticking with me. I'm so excited to talk about this next part too.
Absolutely, Chris. We're not letting go of you. So you're stuck with these two guys. So of course, again, the mystery of the Lady of the Dunes has been solved. Unless you're 6 feet under, you could not have missed the headlines that we now know the name who she is. Her name is Ruth Marie Terry. Chris, how does it feel to be part of bringing the mystery to an end?
I was shocked and pleasantly surprised the fact that this actually occurred, because I think all of us thought eventually maybe something would happen, but the fact that it actually did. Frank had been saying at different screenings of the documentary that he thought this could be solved by the end of the year. And I would always kind of say, it's great, I hope so, but I don't think so. And then when he called me on Halloween to tell me there was a press conference, I said, it's an appropriate day. And it was another movie moment in a line of them.
And of course, Chris, clearly you've, evidently invested heavily in this story, in really looking to solve the mystery of who she was. And anyone who follows you, whether it's your podcast, your book, or works closely with you, can see that. Now, have you found for yourself closure, some sort of closure, now that the mystery has been solved?
I have, and I'm looking to turn that closure in a way to kind of share this overall story with more people. For those that now may be coming to look for more about the Lady of the Dunes, with the documentary hopefully being more widely available soon, I want to keep doing justice to the memory of Ruth Marie Terry, because it's been solved, she's been named, but I don't want it to be where now it's just that's over, because we kind of have an idea of what happened to her and who may be at fault. But these things sometimes have a quick cycle in the news where she'll instantly be forgotten again, and I kind of don't want that.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Now, the purpose of the book, of course, and Frank's documentary, as you guys both expressed, was to give, at the time, the mystery woman her name and possibly bring her killers to justice. Now, we know now that the man that's tied to her murder, suspect in her murder, has since passed. What do you think is going to happen now, Chris?
So it's kind of difficult because I don't know if anyone that is still associated with her murder is still alive, because obviously her final husband, Guy Moldovan, he is long since passed. It's one of those things where even though she's got her name back, I still want to see the full resolution where we know Ruth Marie Terry was in Provincetown because of this. She was murdered because of this. I'm thrilled that her family finally knows what happened to her, but now, even though I said I didn't care as much about who killed her, I didn't expect her to be found in such short order. So now I'm kind of shifting my view where it's like, well, let's go all the way now. We're at the 1 yard line.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I know Stephen has a question for you, maybe more questions for you, but I want to make sure that at some point we circle back to Stephen's note, because I know you're going to feature that note in your book. But Stephen, go ahead, ask your questions.
So Chris, a question that I was thinking of this morning about you coming on is that, as you just mentioned, as you just mentioned, Chris, about none of us realized or thought that this was going to happen October 31st. And now that we have her identity, and now that they're still investigating, from what we've heard from the FBI and from the local authorities, looking at Guy as the prime suspect, how does that change what you're doing with the book? Do you how do you know, okay, when do I finish this? Because I think probably before October 31st you thought, okay, this is, you have like a set ending, and then that changed, or maybe it hasn't changed, but how, like, where are you in the book?
Oh, I'd say you are spot on. This book was done the morning of October 31st. I had been sending it out to literary agents and publishers. I said, here's the whole story. I had the pitches. It was done. And now I've recrafted it where the beginning of the book is actually, the first words written are her name, Ruth Marie Terry. Wow. And so Frank and I took a trip out to the dunes a few weeks ago, and he showed me the spot where she was found. It's not known by many, and so it was very haunting and symbolic to be there. And so that is kind of how the book begins, so that the people that read it know that there is a resolution. It's not a 250-page tease where you get to the end and it's like, well, now you can solve it. It's like, no, it's actually pretty close to being solved. So the last chapter is the revelation and the information. So, yeah, I'm on, I think, my 5th rewrite right now.
Not surprising. I do have a follow-up question to that, though, because I know you had an interview with Frank on your YouTube channel, and you actually titled it "Goodbye, Lady of the Dunes, Goodbye, Ruth Marie Terry." Why do you feel the need to have that follow-up interview?
I wanted to give Frank another platform to kind of express his feelings on her being identified, because he was more deeply connected than even I was, because he's the one that started all of this. And I thought it was very fitting and appropriate that he and I go out into the dunes and do part of the interview standing where she was found. Although people that watch the video, I go out of my way to not show you how to get there, because Frank, he is a man of his word. When he said he did not want to exploit the Lady of the Dunes, he told me, he made me promise to not show how to get out to where she was actually found. And I stuck to that, because he's an honorable man of his word, and he's earned my respect. So when he said that, I was like, that's the least I can do, is follow your word.
Honor that. Stephen, any other questions for Chris?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I'm sure it goes both ways, that he certainly has so much respect for you, Chris, or he would not have brought you out to that place that is so sacred and so limited to the people that do know where that is. So, you know, it goes both ways, and I certainly can see that. And I know that Lady of the Dunes, Ruth, set this up for the majority of the people that should be part of this. So Lady of the Dunes gave you a big nod. I know Frank did, to get you on board, but Lady of the Dunes, Ruth, she gave you a big nod, Chris, saying she loves what you're doing, and that's why you're part of this. It's part of this amazing story.
I feel like
second that. Go ahead.
I feel like it was this like divine intervention, that there's everything I did in my writing led to Frank finding me, and it's unbelievable that I'm a part of this, and I'm continuing it forward where I so I bought the ladyofthedunes.com domain name, and I'm in the process of building a website based around the documentary, the book. I recorded a 4-part mini-series podcast about the Lady of the Dunes. I'm going to have a whole lot of stuff there because I want this to not fade away. I want people to be able to find everything they need to know about the case and the documentary and the book and the people associated with the documentary and the book just easily. So I'm kind of putting my money where my mouth is.
That is awesome, Chris. We do need to take another break, but when we come back, I definitely want to talk back about the note because when we talked to Frank last week, he said in retrospect there were so many things in that note that Stephen wrote that were sort of overlooked, but now you have an opportunity to highlight some of those in your book. So hang in there, Chris. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I'm your host, Coach Elix, with me, my wonderful co host.
Stephen Frederick.
Um, I don't know what's that background noise, but anyways, and we are super, super excited to have an amazing guest, Chris Setterlin, who is the person now in charge of writing the book about Lady of the Dunes. Last week we talked about Frank. We talked with Frank Duran, who is the executive producer and director of the documentary, and Chris is now taking the responsibility of bringing the story to that next level. Now, we talked about the note that you gave Frank last week. He made mention, Stephen, about how there were so many things in that note that were sort of missed. And now in retrospect, we go back and we're saying, wow. So before we go into ask Chris about, the note, Stephen, why don't you explain to our listeners what the note is about?
So, and let me just say quickly that, Chris, when you keep mentioning about you don't want Lady of the Dunes just to die off, what you're doing is going to keep this there for eternity. So, wow, I didn't know about the website, and wow, you just surprised both of us on many levels all the time. So, but the note so last April 2021, when I started filming, 2 days before I filmed, I went out to Race Point Beach and sat by myself and meditated. And as a medium, I do this thing called a whisper in a note. So I asked Lady of the Dunes to just sit next to me and dictate to me what she wants me to write in the note. So, so there, I see parts of the note, but the full note is not exposed there. So when I started filming a couple of days later in April 2021, I handed the note to Frank and told him what it was. And he said, "Can I open it now?" And he read it. And, he certainly had questions on it. And we knew nothing because we didn't know who she was. And so Frank kept that note. And then eventually, I think Frank gave it to you, Chris, right?
Yeah, it's in my hand. During the commercial break, I ran and grabbed it. I have it in my hand.
And what was one of the highlights of that note is that at the end of the note, I said to, I think maybe 3/4 of the way in the note or something like that, I asked her, what is the name of the person who killed you? And she responded with, his name begins with a G or a J. And, people say to me, why G and J? And I say, because I don't see letters, I hear them. So when I heard Lady of the Dunes say to me, starts with a J, I knew that meant either the G or the J. So that's why I put in the note. And right now, that's the prime suspect is her husband, who is his guy. And when I asked her, what do you want me to end this note with what initials? So she had me end the note with R-A-D. Of course, no one knew at that point that her first name was Ruth. And the A-D, I'm not sure yet where that falls in, but I'm sure it will fall into place. But it's remarkable that Chris is writing the book, that I was able to do this note. And I got to tell you, I was honored, Chris, when you said to me, "Can I have the note?"
Yeah, it was something that when I saw it in the documentary, I said, that is a very important piece of the story that doesn't get highlighted enough in the documentary. And I'm a firm, I guess, believer in all of this. So that's where I was like, to me, that's where there's a lot of stuff that lies in it, where I'm sure Frank mentioned there's a 10-year segment of Ruth Marie's life that is kind of a mystery still. So Frank and I talked about there may be other things in your note, Stephen, that come out in the future where the J, the G, the Guy Moldovan, that's there, but there may be other things in here that end up coming out in the weeks and months to come.
I hope so, and I wouldn't be surprised. And I mean, Chris, when I do these notes, I stand by what I hear. And in Lady of the Dunes, again, I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, was so pleased with the players, all the players in Lady of the Dunes, including yourself, and just so thrilled and happy with all of us that, I trusted what she said, and I did my best to interpret the note. But I got to tell you again, I know I just mentioned this, but I'm not sure you get how much of an honor it was when you said, can I have the note, and talked about putting it in the book. It was something that got me very emotional, Chris.
Well, I really appreciate you and your work. And so it was one of those where when I met you and Elix, I was immediately like, it's kindred spirits, like within the first few minutes. And so it was something where I feel that you were a part of the documentary, but you deserve to be even a bigger part in the book. That's one of those where in the book I'm able to flesh out and highlight parts that I think are more important. And that's why the note is such it's transcribed word for word in there. I said, because it's something that's very important and I believe in. And now that's before we even knew her identity, where, the things that are in there that could end up coming out. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated by all of that.
Well, thank you for doing that. And again, I definitely feel privileged and honored that I'm part of this.
Well, I mean, you deserve to be in there. You did a lot of hard work, and Frank, he mentions you a lot when we talk about the the main people that helped him out with this project. I mean, I didn't do much. I came in after he'd already wrapped filming, but you are someone that always comes up and he speaks of with great reverence. So it's one of those where he had already vouched for you and built you up before I met you, and you just confirmed it when we met at the cemetery, which that's a story in and of itself.
It is, and I actually started. I believe I gave you like a mini reading, right? Because there were people around you that I could hear.
Yeah, you ended up. So it's an interesting thing, and this I'll make this brief because I'm a storyteller. But I have a video that I posted on YouTube that is you, the part with you at St. Peter's Cemetery in Provincetown, and you mention a Mary, a Marie that's around me, and then you keep saying Rose. And it's interesting because my grandmother, who had passed a year before, her name is Rose Marie. But then when Ruth Marie Terry came out, and you had mentioned, I know you had said that you hear letters. And so I thought of the Marie and the R, the hard R. And I said, I wonder if if Lady of the Dunes was giving her name. Because as much as I'd love it to be my grandmother, it's more fascinating if the Lady of the Dunes was like, here's my name 8 months before everyone else knows.
Yeah, I mean, I love you, Chris. It's like, Grandma, listen, I love hearing from you, but move over. This is my professional work. So, and it's a double, triple, quadruple validation. I'm sure it was both. I'm sure it was both of them who were so excited knowing what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be giving to this huge audience that I know, Chris, people are dying to see this book. I know they are. They're dying to see the documentary, but just as much is to get to read that book. I know I am. I am dying to get to read this book, to read your book. And I can't help but think also, Chris, that you talked a couple of minutes ago about your previous projects and how and what you were going to do next. And I think this is not only an amazing, amazing experience, in your journey, but this also is going to be the catapult to get to push you to the next place, which is going to be even bigger.
That's what I'm hoping. I feel that everyone's kind of the sum of their choices in life and all the different projects that I've done. I feel like it's built me to this point, and having the privilege of writing this book, like I said, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm making sure if no publisher is willing to take a chance, if no agent is, I have a Kickstarter crowdfund set up where I'm going to crowdfund to have the book published. I would be doing a disservice to everybody involved with the documentary and Lady of the Dunes, Ruth Marie herself, if I didn't see this book get published any way it has to. And I told Frank, I said, I will make sure that this book gets out there because he took a chance on me writing it. So I'm going to give him 110% of what I can do.
Well, Chris, one of the great things is when you're past intensity, opportunities open up. So I am so excited to see where this is going to go.
I am too. 2023. I have a really great feeling about that year.
I love that. So Chris, Elix is having more technical difficulties. So he just texted me and said, "Can you hear me?" I said no. But before this ends, so first of all, make sure you tell people how they can find you, as well as when the book is due, or any the website, the book, or whatever you like.
Okay, so you can find me all over social media. Christopher Setterlund. There's only one of me. I have my home website is ChristopherSetterlund.com. I'm also the host of In My Footsteps, a Cape Cod and New England podcast, which you can find on every platform. I'm coming up on 100 episodes of the podcast. the 100th episode is going to be all about the Lady of the Dunes, a big supersized one. And early 2023 is when I plan on launching theladyofthedunes.com. I am crossing my fingers, hoping to have the book published, printed in early spring. I figure if I put a deadline on myself, that'll get me to do it instead of saying sometime in the future. So that is the plan.
I love that plan. I love it. And there's so many things that I'm so excited, and I know everybody else are so excited about. Because first of all, I didn't until today in this interview, I had no idea that you own the domain, and I can't imagine how amazing that's going to be for like a centralized place for people to go to and see it. And also, I'm sure you're going to attach the book. And I'll tell you, Chris, I think you're ending 2022 in such an amazing place. But I think, as you mentioned, 2023 is going to be just this. Not that you haven't had an amazing life and accomplishments, but I honestly think 2023 is your breakout year. And Lady of the Dunes is going to be that catapult, as I mentioned before, to keep bringing you to better and better places, and for people to see the reason why you're on this earth, Chris.
I hope so, and I love hearing you say that because you've got that vision. So I'm like, if Steven says it, then I definitely.
Well, you know what? That is definitely. I will tell you, that's definitely me tuning into your energy. So that's wonderful. But Christopher, thank you. I'm sure that Elix will have, and I love that we at some point get you back on to get another update on everything that's going on with you. But thank you, and Christopher, happy holidays on behalf of me and Elix.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and I appreciate you and Elix so much, and I wish you all the best for the holidays and into the new year, and hopefully at some point we all can get together and have a few laughs.
We definitely, I think dinner is written in our plans to get together and see you. So thank you again, Christopher. This was amazing. But you know what? I knew for all the audience, I knew this was going to be amazing. I knew it was going to be like a 2-week amazing just plan with Frank starting it last Friday, and then Christopher on here this Friday, which is amazing, all about Lady of the Dunes. So Coach Elix is still having some issues. So if you're looking or want to see Coach Elix, which I would say do that, you can just go to Coach Elix. He's all over social media. His show, Get a Grip with Coach Elix, is Fridays at 1 o'clock. And I'm sure the next time we're on, which I think is next week, I'm sure that this technical stuff will be rectified. If you're looking for me, I am under Stephen the Medium everywhere, so maybe not. I think maybe now that I think of it, I think next week is Christmas Eve, I think so. Well, listen, whenever the next time we see you, we're so excited to get to talk to everybody, and whatever you celebrate for the holiday, have the best holidays, and just always remember, too, that your loved ones who are not physically here anymore are even more so with you, especially when it comes to these holidays and being around you and wrapping their arms around you. So, listen, until next time, thank you guys and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.